South Africa in half. It's now expecting growth of just 0.4% this year, down from a prediction of 0.8% in April. That's actually higher than what the Reserve Bank is expecting, but it's down from 1.3% actual growth last year and nowhere near what South Africa needs to create jobs and deal with poverty and inequality. The global lender has released its Africa's Pulse report, which looks at sub-Saharan Africa. It expects growth for the region as a whole to slow down from 3% last year to just 1.6% this year. It says that's alarming. What is alarming is that because the population is growing faster than economies, there is less growth per capita or person. In other words, we in sub-Saharan Africa are getting poorer. Well, to discuss further, we're joined by Sebastian Dessus from the World Bank. Thank you for joining us, Sebastian. Specifically for South Africa, I saw some commentary today, the population growing at about 1.7%. So we are definitely getting poorer, and we have been for a long time.
You're getting poorer on average, yes. Of course, the story of the poorest of the poor may be different, and we don't know that very well yet because we are still running household surveys to understand better the situation of the most vulnerable in South Africa.
Things look like they will get a little bit better next year. You're saying 1.1%, 1.8% in 2018. In the meantime, are you really worried that given unemployment, the context that we're in, we could even see more unrest? We're seeing students demonstrating. It feels like the pressures, the economic pressures are rising.
The economic pressures are very strong. Inequalities are extremely high, but it is not. At the same time, it's not completely new. You have structural factors in your society which are indeed worrying.
Give me examples. You talk about policy uncertainty across sub-Saharan Africa. We've heard this so many times in South Africa. Political uncertainty. What is worrying you right now?
No, well, if you take back a bit and look at sub-Saharan Africa as a whole, I mean, the main story is the decline in commodity price, which affects production and affects a lot commodity exporters, among which South Africa, Angola, and Nigeria, which are the three largest economies in sub-Saharan Africa, as well as many others. That's the main story. Now, in each country, you have different domestic issues. In South Africa, you have this issue of policy uncertainty, which affects investment. We have seen private investment going down for the last 3 quarters, and this is what led us to revise our forecast for this year to 0.4% based on actual development over the first 6 months of the year.
And policy uncertainty basically means business people don't know what the decision makers are going to say. Is there one area of the economy that's specifically bad?
Well, I mean, of course, these are perceptions, and we hear those perceptions from investors themselves. So this is what they perceive, which is important, which matters for their decision making. We hear policy uncertainty regarding regulations in the telecommunication sector, in the mining sector, in the tourism sector. All these are affecting
so we're still waiting for
investment decisions,
digital migration, things like that.
There are also things, I think, which the perception of still possible electricity shortages, for instance, because of the recent history of blackouts, etc. I think the situation is improving on the ground, but people don't perceive it yet. Or investors may not be sure yet that if they were to expand their activities, there would be sufficient electricity for them.
That's interesting, because we haven't had blackouts for a long time, no load shedding, but you're saying that memory is still there.
I think it's still there, yeah. Despite the fact that capacity is coming online and overall the situation is improving.
I'd like to look at sub-Saharan Africa, but first South Africa is said to be a weight on sub-Saharan Africa. To what extent the low growth that we're seeing, in your opinion, is it due to global factors, the commodity price cycle? To what extent are we as South Africa to blame?
Well, you're not to blame for the decline in commodity price. Of course, it's all demand.
I'm saying that policy uncertainty versus the global context. Which is weighing more?
Oh, it's extremely difficult to say. I think. I would not. I mean, first, it's not a blame game, and I would not try to say who's doing wrong. But clearly, you have external factors which are extremely important: lower demand for commodities, capital flight, uncertainties in Europe. which affect trade, which affect the region, and therefore the clients of South Africa in the rest of Africa as well. These are extremely important. And then you have more domestic factors which are there that I think you know better than me.
If the cycle turns, and we can look at Nigeria as well, oil prices are starting to go up again. Yeah. If gold and platinum goes up, are we out of the woods, or is there still problems?
You will still have problems, and I think for Africa as a whole, I think the very issue is to reduce the dependency on commodities, because we've seen it has not reduced poverty as fast as we would like it to be. It has not reduced inequality as fast as we would like it to be. This is why the second part of the report is discussing the potential for agriculture and investment in agriculture, which we see as the main vehicle or pathway to poverty and inequality reduction in sub-Saharan Africa. Yeah.
That's interesting, because Nigeria, it's easy to say diversify, and maybe some countries, so you're saying you're pushing agriculture. What about South Africa? We already have a diversified economy.
Yeah, so in South Africa, I think the issue is a bit different, because you don't have so many subsistence farmers, and poverty is not very high, but you have a very deep inequality issue that you need to tackle through job creation in the manufacturing sector, etc. So the issues are a bit different because you're much more advanced. But for the rest of Africa, I mean, the report says that about 70% of the population of sub-Saharan Africa still heavily depend on agriculture as an income, but also because it's a main element of your consumption. Well, food is still extremely important in the basket of most African households.
Are you noticing in finality, we know Africa countries are on different paths.
Yes.
Rwanda, for instance, seen as this light. You talk about Ethiopia and others with these great growth rates. Are leaders making good decisions, and is that changing? Are we seeing a divergence in the trajectory of different countries?
So economically speaking, we see some divergent trends or different trends. Yes, some countries are growing fast and have been growing fast for the last 10 or 20 years, as Rwanda, as Tanzania, as Ethiopia. We see countries emerging as new performers, rebounding from difficult situations like Côte d'Ivoire, which is growing extremely fast after a decade of conflict. And we're seeing countries falling on the other hand. So it certainly depends on policy decisions which are being made in the different countries, as well as on some exogenous shocks. You cannot blame the climate, but the climate is extremely important in many countries. You have wars ongoing in West Africa and Central Africa, which are devastating for the economies. And of course, I mean, it's sometimes, I mean, these are beyond the control of countries.
All right, thank you so much for your analysis, Sebastian Dessus from the World Bank. Cutting the growth forecast for South Africa in half, at least we're not looking at a recession, according to many of the recent predictions, and that was a fear at the beginning of this year. Let's look at some of the numbers. The JSE rose significantly for a second day today. The All Share Index added 1.8%. Resources stocks leading the charge. All commodity stocks are sharing in the glow of higher oil prices. The price of Brent crude oil climbing by nearly 6%. This after the oil cartel OPEC finally reached an agreement to limit oil production, which means less supply, higher prices. The bad news, probably a petrol price hike in South Africa next month.